has been nearly 2 weeks since Iran launched almost 200 ballistic missiles at Israel in retaliation for several high-profile assassinations in recent months. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said this week that Israel's response to the attack would be powerful, precise, and above all, surprising. We're back with Randa Slim, Conflict Resolution Director at the Middle East Institute, and Richard Haas, President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations. Richard, Bibi Netanyahu, in addition to giving a speech calling on the Lebanese to rid themselves of Hezbollah, also gave a speech calling on the Iranian people to rid themselves of the Iranian regime. What is the goal of an Israeli strike on Iran, and what should it be?
Well, what you raised, فريد, is the question. We don't know what the goal is. It could range from the modest, shall we say, to the wildly ambitious, and I would put regime change as not a strategy, but a wish. At a minimum, it's to restore deterrence, because that's broken down again with Iran. The real question then is how much more than that, or what does it take? For example, will the Israelis attack, for example, military sites where they produce and store the kinds of rockets and drones that have attacked Israel? That to me has a germaneness or relevance to it. Do they get more ambitious and think about economic targets, something the United States and much of the world would not welcome, the Saudis would not welcome, because they could be a target? Will they try to do something on the nuclear program? Well, how much can they really accomplish on their own?
What should they do?
I would say they should go after military targets, these conventional sites where the Iranians produce and store weapons. I think the Israelis probably should be thinking about threading the needle. They want to restore deterrence. They want to diminish Iran's ability, either directly or through its proxies, to attack Israel. But Iran's still sitting on close to 3,000 ballistic missiles. Iran has lots of tools at its disposal against Israel and against the region. So I would say the Israelis want to respond, but not necessarily put in motion something where the Iranians say, okay, well, if the Israelis are going all out, right, then we're going to go all out.
Do you think the Iranians would view an Israeli strike, say, on military issues as a kind of a beginning of a de-escalation, or is there a real danger that Iran feels like it has to now escalate?
I think there is a real danger of a succession of tit-for-tat retaliatory strikes, partly because the risk tolerance of the Iran regime has changed. When they decided in April that the cost of inaction outweigh the risks of a regional war dragging the U.S. into it. And then in April, they launched those ballistic missiles and drones, and now, in October, they repeated that because they felt that April strike did not restore deterrence. Like the Israelis, I think both of these belligerents, Iran and Israel, are in the process of renegotiating the red lines. Those red lines that existed before and regulated their rivalry have been upended. And partly, again, I think the decapitation of Hezbollah leadership, which has been the linchpin of Iran's resistance axis and the primary deterrent for Iran against direct Israeli strikes on its territory, I think that has changed that calculus. On the Israeli side, I'm afraid that the Prime Minister might be seeing, and his right-wing ministers, this as the unique opportunity to achieve or to go into what many Israelis say it was an inevitable war, the big war, going after the source. And so they see this as a unique opportunity. Given the political moment we are in the US, they know that we will come to their defense no matter what.
Richard, I think the way many Israelis see this, maybe not the government, but look, we've had this amazing success with Hezbollah. Our plan worked better than we could have hoped. Why don't we just press our advantage, take tactical success after tactical success against both Hezbollah and Iran? Who knows where to lead? By the way, the world hates us anyway. They're going to criticize us anyway. The only country that matters is the U.S., and the U.S. is not going to stop us 3 weeks before an election. So just pedal to the metal, just see what happens.
You may well be right, and that might end up being the dominant Israeli policy, both in Lebanon, conceivably in Iran. It already is to some extent in Gaza. The problem with all of this, Reed, is if you add up tactics, it doesn't get you to a strategy. In none of these situations, in none of these venues, do I see a definition of victory, of war termination. What exactly are you prepared to settle for? What price are you prepared to pay, or do you want to avoid? Because Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas all still have tools they can bring to bear. I just don't see anyone in Israel who's looking at this in its totality and saying, how much is enough? What can we accomplish at this point at a reasonable price? That's a dangerous thing to be missing.
And finally, it seems to be, Randa, that one of the mistakes that America makes and that Israel is now making is they say a lot of things about Hezbollah having taken over the Lebanese state, which is correct, about Hamas, having taken over Gaza. But the idea that a foreign army, that an Israeli army will be the instrument of the liberation of the Lebanese people or the Iranian people, seems to me it forgets nationalism doesn't work like that, right?
Exactly. And the longer this war in Lebanon continues, in fact, it's going to create more opportunities for Hezbollah to reassert itself politically and militarily. Already there are reports of them starting a recruitment process and of people wanting to join them, partly because of the opposition to the Israeli invasion. Remember, these are people whose villages are being destroyed, and they're going to put in it everything they've got and entrench Israel in a long, bloody, protracted fight. Instead of Israel capitalizing on the tactical gains it has achieved, it's going to be drawn into a long-term occupation.
Fascinating. Thank you both very much.
Some pretty tough talk coming from the Iranians. Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi saying that Iran was making, as he put it, tremendous efforts to try and stop what he called an all-out war here in this region. At the same time, though, he's also saying that there are no red lines, as he puts it, for Iran as far as the protection of its citizens and its interests are concerned. Now, the Iranians have also made clear what exactly that means. They say that any attack by Israel will be met with an Iranian retaliation. The Iranians, of course, in the past have said that if, for instance, Israel decides to attack Iran's oil and gas infrastructure, that then Iran could in turn also attack Israel's energy infrastructure as well. At the same time, you have the Speaker of Iranian Parliament who was in Beirut, and there he not only pledged Iran's support for Lebanon and for Hezbollah, he also warned the countries of this region not to allow Israel to use their airspace for a possible attack on Iran. He said that could have serious repercussions for those countries. At the same time, you also have the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Forces, which is an extremely important group in all of this because they are responsible for the ballistic missile program and also for air defense. He said that Iran is, as he put it, prepared for any sort of missteps, as he put it, by Israel. Obviously, the Iranians right now bracing for what could be a strong Israeli attack. From CNN, Tehran.